Hey, Dr. C here with you. So, sleep is a big deal. It's one of the biggest factors that determines so many elements of your health. If yours is not great, how can it do better? Here's a whole bunch of tips to help you get better quality sleep each and every night and have that make a big difference for you. So, for starters, let's just talk about sleep and what it is. Our bodies have this mode in which they're operating, we're functioning throughout the day, we're putting out energy, we're doing things. And then we have a mode in which we're repairing all of that. And this comes down to our immune response, our ability to detoxify, our ability to repair our damaged tissues, to grow tendons, ligaments, bones, brain cells, all of that. That repair stuff largely happens at night, and it largely happens in those deeper stages of sleep. So if sleep is not happening, your body is not getting fixed. And we also know that this affects how we store fuel. So many parts of our health are governed by this. Some of the key things are going to be weight, alertness, energy, digestion. If those things are off, sleep is often one of the biggest drivers behind that. And how common are sleep problems? Well, one survey showed that between 30 to 60% of Americans have at least 1 or 2 nights per week in which they're not getting good quality sleep. So like most people, this is more common than not. Really, really, really typical. So let's dive into some tips on how you can get better sleep right away. First off is backing off on caffeine. And this is tricky. So this is something that is harmless for many people, but for some it changes. So some people just genetically don't tolerate caffeine very well. And usually they work that out. They often figure out that they don't tolerate much and they mostly avoid it. But what's trickier is that how we tolerate caffeine can change over time. There's this thing called hepatopause. So our liver function changes as we age, and we get less quick at getting rid of caffeine. It's really common in people reach a state at which it takes them more than 24 hours to completely detoxify caffeine and get it out of your body. Now, let's think about that. If it takes more than 24 hours to get all of it out, and you have a dose every 24 hours, it's building up over time. And there's some remnants of that can be circulating in your blood 24/7. That can affect how quickly you fall asleep, the quality of your sleep. All of these things are relevant. So how do you know if this is affecting you or not? Well, the only way to really know is to stop it and try. There's no blood test, there's no genetic markers. No, the only way to know is to really give it a break. And how long does it take for a break to know for sure if it's a factor? Probably 3 weeks. It may be towards the end of that 3 weeks that sleep quality starts to really improve. But if you struggle with sleep or symptoms that relate to sleep and you use caffeine regularly and this can be a big driver. And let's say that it turns out that it is a factor. It doesn't mean you can never have any ever again, ever. It does mean, though, that if it is a big factor for you, you may want to watch it in the future. It takes a while to really clear it out and see how that's affecting you. But once you've done that, you may do fine with a smaller amount regularly, or maybe just skipping a day or so per week. But yeah, it's worth taking a real test to see. And 3 weeks, during those 3 weeks, you want to really avoid all sources of caffeine. So obvious stuff like coffee or sodas and tea, but also even the amounts you'd find in chocolate. And of course, energy drinks. Some supplements may have that. So to really see if it's a factor, look at all those sources and avoid them all and give it a solid 3 weeks. So along the lines of habits and beverages and drinks and stuff, the same thing goes for alcohol. Now, this is kind of unintuitive because, yeah, if you drink a lot, you get knocked out. But what we've come to realize is that getting knocked out is not the same as getting quality sleep. So yes, alcohol often translates into a fair amount of time with your eyes shut. But when they do sleep studies and look at sleep quality and the sleep architecture, it just robs you of it. So REM sleep and deep stage refreshing sleep are greatly diminished with even small amounts of alcohol intake. So this is true for all forms, even things that are purportedly thought to be healthy, like wine. And a common thing is that people get themselves on a seesaw with caffeine and alcohol. They need one to get going in the morning because they didn't sleep very well. And then they're wired from that. They can't wind down, so they need the alcohol to knock them out. and they're not getting quality sleep. So they wake up exhausted, and the cycle goes on and perpetuates itself. Same thing, give it a try. Give yourself a break of at least 3 solid weeks. See how your sleep quality is affected. Now, if the idea of not drinking for 3 weeks, if that scares you, or you avoid that for some reason, or you resist that, that should give you pause. That should make you think about your relationship with alcohol. If it's not something you could set aside for a little bit, it's probably something you should set aside for a little bit. Kind of an odd paradox, but it's true. Next tip is resistant starch. Now, this is cool stuff, and I'll talk about a few tips that relate to this idea of glucose and sleep. So what happens is that our blood glucose, our blood sugar, it's fluctuating throughout the day, and after meals, we're getting something from our meals that cause it to elevate. But when we're taking long gaps away from meals, we have to keep it controlled by our internal mechanisms. One of those is a stress hormone called cortisol. Now, we make a big burst of cortisol to wake ourselves up in the morning. That's normal. But if we make a bunch of it in the middle of the night, well, we wake ourselves up and it feels like morning, even though it's not. And it can be hard to get back to sleep. Now, when blood sugar levels drop off, the body may release that big burst of cortisol to raise the blood sugar back up again. But the obvious drawback is if you were trying to sleep, it can totally wake you up and take you out of that deep sleep mode. So the more steady your blood sugar remains throughout the night, the more likely you are to stay asleep. So yeah, the blood sugar connection is more about staying asleep than it is about falling asleep. Now, resistant starch, it's something that's kind of between fiber and carbohydrate. So like fiber, it gives fuel to good bacteria. Like carbohydrate, we get some energy too. Unlike carbohydrate, we only get the energy after the good bacteria are done with it. And what that means is the fuel yield into our bloodstream is really slow. And by really slow, I mean like 7 to 9 hours really slow. So if we have a serving of that later in the day, we get a long window of time in which we're receiving a gentle influx of blood glucose, no spikes and crashes, but also no drop-offs that require us to make cortisol. So having some throughout the day, but especially at night, can make a huge difference for those who cannot stay asleep well throughout the night. Where do we get this from? Well, the couple of biggest sources are going to be potatoes, beans, and bananas. Sound like funny things, but yeah, those are the 3 main ones. A little more detail. Potatoes retain resistant starch when they're cooked at lower temperatures. So boiled potatoes are best for this. And we're talking about potatoes. I love sweet potatoes. They're great foods, but they're not as high in resistant starch as regular white potatoes are. In terms of beans, all beans have a lot, but the white beans are highest. So white beans means like white beans are called white beans, but it also includes beans that are white in color, like navy, northern, and cannellini beans. They're all really high in that. Bananas have a bunch too. They have less the more ripe they are. So when they don't yet have brown on the skin, they've got a lot of resistant starch within, and they're good things to include. Next one, and this is related, is cutting out sugar. So the same way that resistant starch does a good job stabilizing your blood sugar, foods that have a lot of processed sugar, well, they screw up your blood sugar. They make it unstable. And I want to differentiate processed sugar from healthy carbohydrate. There's such good data showing that we need healthy carbohydrate for a lot of reasons, but processed sugar is not the same. So good carbohydrate, like we mentioned, the potatoes, the resistant starch, also things like brown rice, yams, pinto beans, fruits. These are healthy foods to include in the diet. We don't want to be scared of carbohydrate. But white sugar, sodas, candies, those sorts of things, not our friend, not going to make our blood sugar steady. Next up would be exercise. So this is something to where the data is so strong that it makes a huge difference towards better quality of sleep. And here's why. We've got this fight or flight response, and our bodies are quick to go into it, but it's a fight or flight response. So we expect that we're going to fight something or run away from something. But that almost never happens. Most of these things we think through, we talk through, we do something, but we don't resolve them physically. So our bodies don't always get the sense that the stressor is gone, that it's over. But exercise is kind of like an artificial fight. Your body thinks that you're running from something or fighting from something. So it helps to hit the reset on that recurrent stress response. And the earlier we do this in the day, the better for those with sleep issues. If you train really hard close before bed, not a good thing. You can elevate that cortisol. We want to elevate cortisol in the morning, and we want it to wind down as the day goes along. So train hard early in the day. Have fun, work out, enjoy that, but not so much later on. In terms of types of exercise, if you do none, any kind you do will be helpful. So don't stress about that at all. In terms of most bang for the buck, if you really want to dial in sleep, we have the most data about moderate to higher intensity aerobic activity. So this can be running, cycling, treadmill, Stairmaster, swimming, hiking, you name it. But any version of that that's at least half an hour, somewhere between half an hour and an hour, and at an intensity that's sustainable but challenging. And the health benefits of that are so large. Next tip, get sunlight. Get some sunlight. So what happens is that there's this daily rhythm that our body goes through, and our bodies need to have this rhythm reset because it drifts over time. And the main cue that tells us when it's morning is the morning light coming out. Now, when we're living inside, we turn on the lights when we wake up, right? It's not the same thing. So the type of light and the intensity of light indoors is not the same as sunlight. And our brains don't totally get that it's morning when we turn the lights inside. So the solution is, go outside. Your first hour of the day, get about a half an hour outdoors. Even a cloudy day, the amount and the type of light you get is so much greater, and your body sees the difference. Now, in some parts of the year and in some places of the world, going outside first thing in the morning will not yield sunlight. So there's that. In those cases, you want a light box. There's many that are out that generate 10,000 lux, L-U-X. Those are units of light intensity. And same thing, you want to use that for roughly half an hour within your first hour of being awake. Now, the flip side of getting bright light in the morning is having a dark room at night. And this is also a big cue for our brains. Now, opposite of the morning, so you want to have things dark. And ideally, we start dimming about an hour before bed. I'll talk a bit more about other rituals in advance to bedtime. So you want to start dimming lights an hour before, but while you're sleeping, while it's nighttime and while you're in bed, you want it as pitch black as you can get it. So a couple thoughts about that. Blackout curtains can be a consideration. If you've got various lights on like alarms or devices in your room, consider covering those over. I've used electrical tape or thick versions of tape to do that. Totally fine. The ultimate nuclear option is the eye mask. And there's really comfy ones that are readily available nowadays. So easy thing to consider, and that's great if you're traveling or whatnot, but you want it dark when you're sleeping. So good and dark. Now, related one. So think about this. Your body is adapted to an environment that's very different from the one in which we live now. Our bodies were adapted to living, outdoors and seeing the changes of seasons, the daylight and the darkness, but they also saw temperature change. So we used to get colder at night. And our bodies expect that when it gets colder, it's time to go to sleep. But if our temperature is always the same, if the air temperature is always the same, we lose that signal. So easy thing, you want to lower the temperature by at least 5 degrees when you're going to bed. A couple of tricks. You want this to start about an hour before bed. So this starts in that unwinding phase. And if you've got like a air conditioning system or a heating system, you can adjust that manually, or a lot of them can be automated nowadays. You can pre-program that, and many have a setting that's distinct for bedtime. So yeah, at least 5 degrees or more cooler. Now, another one, which this can overlap with the last one, is having some version of white noise going. So if you're using your AC or your heating system, you can have the fan go constantly throughout the course of the night. Another trick can be a white noise generator. A fan in your room or the adjoining room can work really well. You don't want any wind blowing on your face, so like ceiling fans in the room, not a great idea, but this simply masks more background noises. So if you're a light sleeper, you can hear little stuff in the background, and that can just get you up and wake you up suddenly. A related topic to think through is earplugs. So if you are a really light sleeper, you can also consider sleeping with earplugs. Those are great if you've got a bed partner that snores or makes noise at night, or other things go on like pets move around the house or whatnot. That can take the white noise up a level. There's a lot of really good options. They're from silicone or from foam, and you want ones that are going to sit more flush with your ear so you don't roll around and knock them out at night. I've gotten in the habit of these, and I really like it. Now, it does take a few days, maybe even a week or so, to get the hang of it. At first, it's kind of a break from the routine, and it feels odd. But after a little bit, it becomes totally automated. And yeah, so many of the minor background noises that aren't a big deal, you won't hear. Now, they don't make you deaf, so anything significant you've got to hear, you'll still hear it. Don't worry about that. A couple more thoughts, a couple more good tips. One of which is be aware of your thyroid levels. So anytime thyroid hormones are not right, they can affect you in countless ways, and sleep is one of many of those. So it could be too much hormone, too little hormone, thyroid autoimmunity, the wrong type of medication, changes in medications, all of these things can be relevant. So do stay on top of your thyroid health and know that if it's not right and your sleep is off, that there's probably a real big connection that way. And you want your thyroid right for tons of other reasons, but this is just one more of those. Another good tip is journaling. Now, this is something you can do throughout the day and or at bedtime. If you're doing it at bedtime, you do want to do it in a way that's not involving screens and electronics. So think about just paper and pencil. Throughout the day, a lot of apps are great. You can access those wherever. You can go back to your old entries from wherever, so those are handy that way. But why does this help? Well, it seems that our brains physically store emotional stress and trauma. And we can break that stress down and eliminate it by converting it into words. And it's weird because it feels like that's what's happening when we're thinking and when we're regurgitating things and emotions, but we're really not. There's really nothing productive coming from that. It's only when you convert things into words that are going to go outside of you that it physically changes. So, talking can work as well, but for some things it can often make sense just to journal and just write that anonymously and privately, and don't really judge the contents, the grammar or whatnot. Just let your feelings flow. And throughout the day, very helpful, but especially before bed. And it's really common that a lot of the recurrent nagging thoughts that might bother you later won't if you write them down in some way. Okay, another good tip, put the phone down. So for a while, we thought that phones, electronic things, that they would goof up your sleep because they emitted an artificial color of light. So now a lot of screens, they adjust the light throughout the day. Well, turns out it wasn't that. It's not the color of light they emit at all. It's the fact that you're on your phone when you should be sleeping. So yeah, it's mental stimulation. So in your last hour before bed, really put the phone down. Give your body a chance to properly wind down. This is a great time to dim the lights, spend some time with a physical book. There are some kind of a in-between thing here. There are some good e-readers that don't have background lighting. So not the tablet ones, but like the Kindle ones that are just meant to be books. Those are viable options, as are just paper books. They're great. The readers are kind of neat because you can have dim light. You can have very little background lighting in the room and they can still work fine. But yeah, just quiet, mellow stuff for that last hour. Another good exercise, another good tip here is progressive muscle relaxation. So this is pretty neat. You think about getting the wiggles out when you go to bed. This is a deliberate way of doing that. And a lot of our tension, a lot of our mental tension is the same as physical tension, muscular tension. So with progressive muscle relaxation, you basically go through your body toe to head and choose muscle groups and contract them, hold them tight, and relax them. So for example, if you're doing your hands, one of the last few ones, take a deep breath in, hold them really tight, and then relax. And exhale. But that's PMR. You just do that toe to head. So yeah, feet, legs, butt, core, arms, hands, head. You go step by step. And it takes just a couple minutes. but it does a huge benefit at releasing background muscular tension and allowing sleep to be better. Okay, another big one is having a schedule. You want your sleep to occur at a recurrent, regular time. And without that, the body doesn't know when it's going to happen and it doesn't get into the mode properly. So having the schedule, there's different facets to that. Of them, probably your top priority is waking up at the same time. So always waking up at the same time each morning. The pitfall is it's easy to sleep in some days, like on the weekends, and have that completely disrupt the whole rhythm. So always waking up at the same time. Probably number 2 would be having a morning meal. So eating a solid meal within your first hour of being awake is big. And the other ones would be your sleep time being consistent and having that wind down process. Another tip, here's one you probably wouldn't have thought of, but eat foods that have melatonin. So yeah, I'll talk in other videos about melatonin supplements, but foods have it as well. Plants make it for the same reasons that we do. They change their activity from day to night, like finding sun and closing up, and they use melatonin to adjust those rhythms. Now, it's kind of odd, but the amounts they have are significant, but the changes that occur to our blood levels are greater than would be predicted by the amount found in plant foods. So somehow plants with melatonin help us with our own production more than what they give us, if that makes sense. And the cool thing too is that it's not a matter of eating them before bed. It's not like you're taking a melatonin supplement. It's more so that when you consume them throughout the day, your body can more easily make melatonin when it wishes to. So what are the best food sources of it? Pretty cool things, some neat foods. Pistachios, number 1, and black cherries, number 2. So great foods, easy to work in throughout the day. Again, you don't have to do them at bedtime, but the more often you have those, the better your body can do at melatonin production. So there's a whole bunch of cool tricks you can try. If there's some of those that are things you're not doing at all, they might be your highest priority. But the more of those you put into place, the better your sleep can do. And that's the thing, sleep is critical. This is a factor for energy, for body weight, for your mood, for your alertness, your mental health, just how well your brain works. It's essential for that. And no one can't sleep. No one has a broken sleeper. A lot of people have problems sleeping for sure, but we now know that these problems can be solved by simple behavioral tricks. Medications don't really help much at all. They, like alcohol, can force you to close your eyes, but they really don't give you more quality sleep. But tips like this can make a huge difference. So try some out, enjoy a better night's sleep, and I'll talk to you again really soon. Bye-bye.